Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Before I begin, I would like to say thank you all for the wonderful birthday wishes. My birthday is coming up this week, and also happy birthday to all of the other July babies out there. Have you ever wondered about the lives of people who are born into criminal families or people who live in a family that had generations of criminal activity? Today's story, I will talk about the Levering family and how it led to Nico Jenkins being sentenced to death. The Levering family name became popular in the early 1900s when Native American leader Levi Levering became the first Native American commissioner to the Presbyterian General Assembly. Levi's posterity ended up making the Levering family name synonymous with crime and violence. Levi Levering had a son by the name of Lincoln Levering, who was born in the year 1900. Lincoln had a temper, and one day in 1944, while hanging out at a bar with his friend, a man directed some racist comments towards them, so Lincoln and his friend started beating up the man and his friend, and one of the men died at the hands of Lincoln. He did get arrested, but he was later acquitted because there was not enough evidence to prove that he was the one who actually delivered the fatal blow. 12 years later, in 1956, he pushed his wife off of a second-story balcony, and although she did survive, she broke her back. After this event, Lincoln was hit by a car and died. Lincoln's wife Elizabeth died a couple of months after he did due to complications from her broken back. Lincoln married twice in his lifetime and had children with each wife. One son he had with his wife Rose was named Nelson B. Levering. Nelson was a professional boxer who was inducted into the American Indian Hall of Fame in Kansas, and he was able to stay out of trouble unlike his half-siblings. Lincoln and his wife Elizabeth had 9 children together, and most of them got into some type of trouble with the law. Their daughter Daphne Levering grew up on the Omaha Reservation and went on to have 2 daughters. Daphne was found guilty of child abuse in 1997, so she did not have a relationship with her daughters for a while, but they did eventually rekindle their relationship. One of Daphne's daughters by the name of Tony Levering became an alcoholic, had a son born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and later on she ended up leaving 2 of her children at a trailer by themselves. She was not involved in her children's lives. She went to jail for approximately 6 months for assaulting her boyfriend and was arrested at a later date for carrying a concealed weapon. In 2002, she gave up her parental rights and allowed her mother Daphne to take care of her children. Tony's daughter Desiree Levering, who was abandoned by her mother and was able to live with her grandmother for a while, grew up with many issues. Daphne ended up passing away in 2002, so her and her siblings stayed in foster care until they aged out. While in foster care, she got into a lot of trouble, starting at a very young age. At the age of 14, she and a couple of friends beat up a woman and stole her car, so she spent time in juvie, and while locked up, she was sentenced to an extra year for assaulting a juvenile correctional officer. It was reported that she suffered from antisocial personality disorder, and the judge brought up how she laughed and joked with her friends when they were being arrested. Daphne's second daughter, Ida Levering, was in constant trouble with the law as well, and she had 2 sons, one by the name of Tyrone Wells and another by the name of Cornelius Levering. Ida was convicted when her children were young of beating and shooting a man. She was arrested another time for using a weapon to commit a felony and started using drugs. It's noted that one of her sons was born with cocaine in his system, and after another child was born with cocaine in his system, she lost her parental rights and continued having issues with drugs and alcohol. Cornelius was placed in foster care and was later adopted. He was raised well and went on to attend college at the University of Nebraska. As for his brother Tyrone, he too was placed in foster care and adopted as well, but he was not able to avoid trouble. He was convicted of robbery and burglary, and he ended up getting convicted for a long sentence after he went to Miller Park Elementary School and began shooting at police officers when they arrived. He was charged with 9 felonies for that incident. Lincoln and Elizabeth had a daughter by the name of Phyllis, and she married a man by the name of Arnett Wagner. Phyllis moved, abandoned her children, and left them for Arnett to raise and take care of by himself. One of their sons, Robert Wagner, grew up in a life of crime and had been convicted of assault and possession of a stolen firearm. He sued the city of Omaha and the police officers because he felt that they used excessive force when they arrested him the night his second cousin Jimmy Levering was killed in 2011. Elizabeth and Lincoln also had a daughter by the name of Lucille, who got married and had a child by the name of Christine Bordeaux. Christine was just like other members of her family, got hooked on cocaine, and when she gave birth to one of her sons, and he was found to have cocaine in his system, he was temporarily taken away from her. They were reunited, but in 2009, her son got into trouble for shooting BB guns with a friend. Christine was not able to stay out of trouble and was convicted for approximately 30 different crimes and 3 felonies. Later on, she got involved with her cousin Nico Jenkins for a conspiracy to commit robbery. Another child Elizabeth and Lincoln had together was a girl named Maxine Levering. Although Maxine was able to avoid any legal troubles, her children were not able to do the same. Maxine and her husband Jimmy had a daughter by the name of Tanya Levering, who was in and out of jail and or on and off probation for theft charges, and in 2011 she was convicted for assault and battery. Tony had a son named Jimmy Levering that was born in 1989. He was a notorious gang member in Omaha and was involved in gun violence as young as 13 years old when he was shot at. By age 17, he was charged with first-degree murder, but because of his notoriety, the witnesses changed their mind on testifying, so the charges against Jimmy were dropped. He was later convicted of 2 felonies and had to spend a little over 2 years in prison. Many people in his family say that he was trying to leave the gang life after getting out of prison, but when he was 21, he was fatally gunned down while hanging outside of a club. Tonya's twin sister Sonia had a drinking problem and was convicted for many crimes as well. Her son, Dexter Levering, was raised around drugs and violence, and by the time he was 27 years old, he already had 45 convictions and 1 felony assault charge. Tanya and Sonia's older sister Connie was also involved in criminal activity and ended up getting arrested for stabbing her sister Tanya in the neck. The charges against her were later dropped, but she was not able to avoid the same fate as a majority of her family members. Connie's daughter Bailey's was sent to juvie at a very young age for assaulting and carjacking a woman with her 2 cousins, Melanie and Erica. The female victim offered them all a ride home, but they took advantage of her nice gesture by stunning her with a stun gun, stealing all of her belongings, and making her get out of the car. There were 5 more children that Elizabeth and Lincoln had together. 4 were able to stay out of trouble, but the last one on the list was not. It was a daughter by the name of Norma Ann Levering, who was Nico Levering's grandmother. Norma moved to Omaha, Nebraska after her parents, Lincoln and Elizabeth, died, and immediately started getting into trouble. She was arrested at 20 years old for robbery and continued a life of crime when she got out of prison. When she was in her early 30s, she was shot, but it did not faze her. Many knew her in the Native American community, and she was elected on multiple boards, but one day after giving birth to one of her 9 kids, she wrapped him in a blanket, dropped him off at her sister's house, and moved to Denver, Colorado to start a new life. Norma was married to a man and had 3 children with him. First was Robert Levering, who had over 30 convictions and was in prison for stealing and obstructing an officer. He got into more trouble and got felonies for theft, burglary, and unlawful transport of firearms. The next son was Warren Levering, and although he grew up in foster care, he still grew up getting into a lot of trouble, and when he was 16 years old, he was able to meet his half-sister Lori, who was the mother of Nico Jenkins. Warren spent time in prison in multiple states and had serious charges against him, with the most heinous being the murder of a woman named Andrea Kruger. Garland Levering was raised by Adeline, who was Norma's half-sister on her mother's side. Garland had a daughter named Alicia. She was able to avoid getting into any trouble and had even started up her own company and raised her cousins' children if their parents were unable to care for them. Norma had 4 children with another man by the name of George Jenkins, and each child got into trouble with the law. James Jenkins had 2 felony theft charges and multiple misdemeanors. He had multiple children but did not stay on top of his responsibilities with child support, so he was charged with missing payments. Another son, Merwin Levering, first went to prison at the age of 18 when he shot someone. That incident happened in 1989, and a few years later in 1993, he got in trouble for stealing a car that belonged to the governor at the time, Ben Nelson. After getting out of prison, he was quickly back into trouble and got arrested for assaulting a woman. On the way to jail and in the back of the police vehicle, Merwin kicked the window out and went on the run. He was able to evade police for a while, but he was eventually caught and convicted for felony escape and 2 misdemeanors. Another son of Norma's was named Jeffrey Jenkins, and Jeffrey was sent to prison over 5 times for crimes including theft, drug dealing, and traffic cases. The last child Norma had with George was a daughter named Lori Jenkins. Lori was a teen mom with a man who was in his 30s and had had protection orders filed against her. Lori had one daughter with a man by the name of Patrick Sales, and their daughter's name is Lori Sales. She did not grow up with her father because he passed away when she was a baby, but she did try college and making an honest living, but she eventually fell into the family cycle of crime. The eldest child was Sophia Jenkins, who, although helped raise her younger siblings, still had an extensive criminal background and was involved in drugs. Because of her criminal activity, her children stayed with their father. The next child was Melanie Jenkins. Melanie was convicted of felony robbery and was involved in other criminal activity as well. She had children, and it's been documented that one child was temporarily taken away from her because she was unable to care for him and provide necessary things that he needed for his special needs. Another child was Erica Jenkins. Erica also started her criminal activity very young, and by the age of 23, she was facing a 30-year sentence for murdering an inmate. She was already locked up for robbery charges and had even assaulted a correctional officer. She was also charged with conspiracy with her brother Nikko when he went on a killing spree. The family tree of the Levering family includes many members who were not able to escape the generational curse of violence and criminal activity. This brings us to Nico Allen Jenkins, who was born on September 15, 1986 in Colorado. His parents were David Maggie and Lauren Jenkins. Both of his parents had a criminal background, and his father David not only had a relationship with Lori, but Nico's aunt Ida as well. It's been reported that he got both women pregnant and assaulted them both during their pregnancy, and he also had gone to prison for manslaughter. Lori and David did not shield their children from any criminal activity they were involved in. Nikko and his siblings experienced and witnessed many horrible things, but because it was the only thing they knew, it was the only natural thing to do to continue on with the criminal lifestyle like their parents. As early as 7 years old, he had access to a gun and brought it to school, showing it off to his classmates. Although no one was injured that particular day, Nikko admitted later on that he would frequently bring a gun to school and had even shot fellow classmates off campus before and had gotten away with it. He experienced many traumatic events at an early age and harbored a lot of hate and anger inside. It's been reported that one day he chased his sister around the house with a knife and had screamed to his family that he wished he was no longer alive. Dealing with depression and anxiety at a young age, Nikko started having night terrors, would frequently pee in the bed, but that did not stop him from continuing to hang around the wrong people and getting into trouble. He was eventually taken out of his parents' home and put into the foster system. Things did not get better in foster care, and Nikko ended up joining a gang. At the young age of 15, Nikko was convicted for hijacking and aggravated assault. This was not his first run-in with the law as a teenager, and he spent majority of his life locked up for crimes ranging from robbery, arson, and assault. While he was locked up, it's been documented that because of his behavior, he spent majority of his time in isolation or in restrictive housing units. While locked up and secluded, he started becoming obsessed with an ancient Egyptian serpent god and tried to mutilate his body to match this particular god. He tried to chop off his penis, and he also tried to cut his tongue to look like a serpent tongue, but was unsuccessful and had to get surgery, which left bad scarring. In 2009, while Nikko was still locked up, his father died. The following year, in February of 2010, Nikko married 19-year-old Shalandra while she was also locked up at the Tecumseh State Prison. Shalandra had been no stranger to prison and had been in and out 3 times. Nikko was released from prison in July of 2013. He had been in prison for 10 years, and just a month after his release, he went on a killing spree. He said that his goal was to please an ancient Egyptian demon serpent god named Apophis. He knew he needed to kill, but the kills would be a sacrifice to Apophis. He and Shalandra were together, and in the course of their relationship, they had only spent a maximum of 4 weeks together. Shalandra said that Nikko had threatened her, and although he did start his killing spree, he killed more people who survived, and Shalandra was there with him. His first kill came on August 11, 2012, when Nikko killed 2 men at random, Juan Pene and Jorge Ruiz. The men were sitting in a white car when Nikko approached them and robbed them. Juan was shot in the groin and in the head, and Jorge was fatally shot in his head. A little over a week after Nikko killed Juan and Jorge, he killed Curtis Bradford by shooting him multiple times in the back on August 19th while inside of a garage. Curtis was actually friends with Nikko because they had met in prison. Finally, on August 21st, Nikko killed the last victim in his killing spree. Andrea Kruger was shot multiple times and was left dead in the middle of the road. Police found the bodies of Jorge and Juan the day that they were killed. A patrol officer was in the area and saw their white Ford pickup truck near the city's swimming pool. It was reported that the men could have been lured to the private area they were in under the pretense of being able to have sex with women. Once they let their guards down, they were robbed and killed. Although the bodies were found, there were no leads yet. On August 19th, the same day Curtis Bradford was killed, police found his body after a man who was walking home from work passed by, noticed his dead body, and notified authorities. While investigating the murder, authorities looked into Curtis's Facebook and discovered that his last Facebook post was a day before he was murdered, and he had posed for a picture with none other than Nico Jenkins. When Andrea was killed, there were calls immediately being made to police for shots fired. There was surveillance of the area, and investigators saw that Andrea left her place of work, the Deja Vu Lounge, at around 2 o'clock in the morning. They ended up finding Andrea's car over 10 miles away, and also noticed that whoever stole it attempted to destroy it by burning it. It wasn't until August 30th, Nikko was apprehended for something other than the murders. He was charged for making terroristic threats, but because of the surveillance in Andrea's case, they were able to connect him with that murder. While being questioned on multiple occasions and sometimes for over 8 hours, Nikko would ramble, but had no issues confessing to all of his kills. After his first confession, he was charged with 4 murders. Not only was Shalandra with him during his killing spree, but his uncle Warren and his aunt Christine Bordeaux, who was a witness to 4 of the murders. She was initially charged with buying ammo because they had surveillance footage, but it turned out it was Nikko's mother, Lori Harvey, who purchased ammo for her son's killing spree. Because of that, she was convicted for accessory and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Over the next few years while in prison awaiting trial, Nikko wrote many letters to people expressing why he had to kill. Some of those letters were sent to prosecutors, and there was one sent to a judge. When 2014 rolled around and before his trial date, Nikko filed a $250,000 lawsuit against the state of Nebraska for releasing him from prison despite his pre-existing conditions. He expressed that he told prison staff that he was hearing voices, and the years locked up in solitary caused him to start hearing voices and made his schizophrenia worse. He also expressed that he was not fit to stand trial because of those issues, and he was also suffering from OCD and bipolar disorder. Not only did Nikko sue the state, but one of his victims' family members sued as well. Andrea Kruger's family sued the state for $7.5 million because they also did not agree with Nikko being released from prison when prison officials knew he was a danger to society and expressed to them that he wanted to kill random people. Before trial began, the judge requested that Nikko have a psychological evaluation, and the psychiatrist concluded that out of the many disorders Nikko claimed to have, he truly had none, but he was diagnosed with having antisocial personality disorder. The psychiatrist believed that everything else was for show and that Nikko was faking all other mental illness claims. He was deemed competent to stand trial, and Nikko decided to represent himself during trial, which was allowed. While in court, Nikko would exhibit off behavior, speaking in tongues, making loud yells, and laughing. He would also do these things when the deaths of his victims were being talked about. Nikko was found guilty of all murders on April 16, 2014 by Judge Peter Battalion, and 3 years later, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death. He also received a 450-year sentence for weapons charges. His second cousin, Christine Bordeaux, was in prison and agreed to testify against him and other family members who were witnesses or linked to the murders. Nikko's sister Erica was locked up at the same prison as Christine and beat her up to prevent her from testifying. The fight did not stop Christine from testifying, and Erica was convicted and is now in prison serving a sentence of over 100 years. Nikko's most recent appeal came on April 30th, 2020, but the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear his case. Nikko and his wife divorced in 2017, and she went on record to say, "At the end of the day, I fault the system for it, period, point blank. Nikko is entitled to his own actions, but at the same time, I fault the system for failing my husband. I fault the system because if you guys would have given him the proper help that he needed, maybe he would have been in some mental institution right now, and these 4 victims would have still been alive. I feel sorry for the victims. I feel sorry for all 4 of them. I feel sorry for people who got hurt by Nikko." Thank you all for watching another episode of Death Row Executions. Do you feel different about a criminal if you learn that they have grown up with generations of violence, abuse, and criminal activity?